That just shows you how quickly she was working towards this marriage, that she had already decided to plan her honeymoon before the engagement.
What if one of the most trusted voices in Christian media just turned on one of its biggest stars? Joyce Meyer's jaw-dropping exposé didn't just ruffle feathers. It sent shockwaves straight through Daystar, leaving Joanie Lamb's reputation hanging by a thread. Behind-the-scenes secrets, explosive claims, and a stunning betrayal have put the network in chaos. The truth is out, and nothing will ever be the same for Joanie or Daystar. It's not often that someone as respected and widely trusted as Joyce Meyer decides to publicly call out another major figure in Christian media. But when she did, it sent shockwaves through the community. For years, Joyce Meyer and Joni Lamb had been seen as allies. They appeared together at events, supported each other's ministries, and were part of the same world of influential Christian broadcasting. That's why her sudden and direct criticism of Joanie Lamb felt like a lightning strike, completely unexpected and impossible to ignore. The revelation came without the usual soft, behind-the-scenes conversations people in ministry often rely on to address disagreements. Instead, Joyce took her concerns public, and she didn't mince words. She said she had grown increasingly worried about the direction Daystar was heading under Joanie's leadership. Joyce painted a picture of a ministry that had lost its way, shifting from service, openness, and community outreach into something more self-fictioned and controlled. With lost faith in the leadership, Joni decided to leave Daystar under its own power. She implied that Joni had allowed personal ambition and a hunger for power to take priority over the network's original mission. For the Christian community, this was not some small, behind-the-scenes quarrel. This was one of the most well-known Bible teachers in the world, someone with a massive global audience, essentially telling millions of believers that something was seriously wrong inside one of the biggest Christian networks on the planet. And it wasn't just what Joyce said. It was the fact that she was willing to say it publicly. That alone told people the rift between her and Joni had grown so deep that it could no longer be handled quietly. The fallout was immediate. News spread quickly, first through ministry feedback outlets, then into mainstream media. Supporters of both women jumped into heated debates. Many people agreed with Joyce, saying they too had noticed a change in Daystar's tone and focus in recent years. Others defended Joni fiercely, claiming Joyce's words were exaggerated or born out of personal differences rather than real issues with the network. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was certain: the damage to Joni's image was done. Inside Daystar, the atmosphere reportedly shifted overnight. Staff members and close associates were caught off guard, unsure how to respond to such a public rebuke from someone of Joyce Meyer's stature. Those who had quietly questioned Joni's leadership before suddenly felt validated. Those who were loyal to Joni closed ranks, determined to push back against what they saw as an unfair attack. The divide was no longer just a private matter within leadership, it had become a public crisis. Then came the most shocking part: the swift removal of Joni Lamb from her leadership role at Daystar. The decision came so quickly after Joyce's comments that people were left wondering if the two were directly connected. There was no long, drawn-out process, no gradual transition. It was sudden, dramatic, and final. For many viewers who had watched Joni for years, it was almost unthinkable. She wasn't just a co-founder, she was the face of the network. Seeing her removed felt like watching a cornerstone of the ministry being pulled out. For longtime supporters, this raised serious questions. If Joyce Meyer's comments were enough to spark such a drastic change, what had really been going on behind the scenes? How deep were the issues, and what else might be revealed in the days to come? For others, the removal confirmed exactly what Joyce had been warning about: that something had been wrong for a while, and now it was finally coming to light. The situation didn't just impact the Lamb family or the Daystar leadership team. It sent ripples across the broader Christian media landscape. Ministries, churches, and leaders everywhere were watching closely, aware that this wasn't just about one disagreement. It was about trust, accountability, and whether even the most powerful ministries could be held responsible when they strayed from their original calling. In the end, Joyce Meyer's bombshell was more than just a public criticism. It was the spark that ignited a firestorm, forcing the issues at Daystar out into the open and creating a moment of reckoning for the network. And while the full truth of what led to Joni Lamb's removal may still be unfolding, one thing is clear: nothing in the Christian media world will ever see her in quite the same light again. When Marcus Lamb passed away, the the leadership of Daystar Television Network, one of the largest Christian broadcasting organizations in the world, was thrust into a difficult transition. Marcus had been the driving force behind Daystar's success, his vision, passion, and influence helping it grow from a small, family-run ministry to a global media powerhouse. With his sudden passing, the natural assumption was that his son, Jonie Lamb, would take the reins. He had been deeply involved in the operations of the network, and many saw him as the heir to Marcus' legacy. But things didn't go as many expected. Instead, Joni Lamb, Marcus's widow, stepped into a more prominent leadership role, and as time went on, her control over Daystar grew.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to take a few minutes today to speak from my heart to the Daystar family and friends. Recently, Daystar made the decision to terminate my son, Jonie Lamb's employment. That decision was not taken lightly. It followed a 15-month review of Jonathan's performance and his refusal to take any steps to satisfy a detailed performance improvement plan put in place. He also refused my offer to participate in a formal mediation to resolve grievances in a biblical and professional manner. Rather than take any steps to improve his performance at Daystar, it seems clear now that Jonathan was focused on fabricating a smear campaign. You see, Jonathan was extremely disappointed that he was not named the future president of Daystar following the death of his father and my husband, Marcus Lamb, despite the fact that Marcus had given a clear directive to the family and to the board that I would succeed him as president. Jonathan's disappointment in not getting his way only deepened when I married Dr. Doug Weiss, who has been such a blessing to me, the rest of my family, and Daystar. I can tell you that as a mother, as a grandmother, this situation saddens me deeply, and it grieves my heart because I love my family. I love all my children. I love my grandchildren. I love the work we've done together for so many years. And I had hoped that we could have resolved the situation in private. But now, Jonathan has given me no choice except to speak out. Everyone knows that we have dedicated our lives to spreading the love of Jesus, and to see it attacked by my son Jonathan and his wife is truly heartbreaking.
At first, the shift seemed understandable. Joni, who had been a supportive figure alongside Marcus, was now at the helm of the organization. The grief of losing her husband was still fresh, and many saw it as a necessary step for stability. But over time, Joni's approach to leadership began to change. What had started as a shared leadership with input from family members and trusted colleagues began to feel more like an autocratic system. Decisions that once involved group discussions, family collaboration, and collective input started being made unilaterally by Joni. As the years passed, her control over the direction of Daystar became more apparent, and with it, the tensions that started bubbling beneath the surface of the network began to grow. It wasn't immediately obvious. To outsiders, Daystar still seemed like the family-oriented network it had always been. Joni continued to appear on screen, hosting shows and participating in the network's programming. However, those closer to the organization started noticing a shift in the culture. Where Daystar had once been a collaborative ministry, with decisions made by the family together, the power dynamics began to change. Joni became the central figure in the organization, making the big calls while other family members and key staff were pushed to the periphery. Jonathan, who had worked closely with his father and had been poised to take on a bigger role in the organization, found himself increasingly sidelined. His growing frustration was palpable. The issue wasn't just that Jonathan wasn't getting the role he thought he deserved. It was that his concerns were being ignored. And over time, he felt that his input was no longer valued. The leadership style that Joni was adopting was creating divisions within the family. Instead of working together to make decisions, Joni increasingly isolated herself, making key decisions without consulting anyone, including Jonathan. Began moving out too, without anyone asking, and Jonathan was left stuck in the house with Jonathan and his son. This change didn't just impact the leadership dynamics, it seeped into the entire culture of the network. Inside Daystar's offices, the atmosphere became tense. Staff members who had worked with Marcus and Joni for years began to feel the shift in power. Some felt that Joni was losing sight of the ministry's original mission, a mission centered around spreading faith and helping people. Others felt she was more focused on maintaining her own power and influence, prioritizing control over the mission. Programming decisions, once made with input from multiple voices, began to align more closely with Joni's personal agenda. This wasn't just about the direction of Daystar. It was about the values the network was supposed to represent. As the leadership shifted, so did the network's content. What had once been a diverse platform, focused on spreading a wide range of Christian messages, slowly became more focused on Joni's vision. Ministries and voices that had once been an integral part of Daystar's programming were sidelined. Some staff members began to feel that the network was shifting from a ministry built on faith to something more akin to a media empire. Daystar's mission, which had always been to serve others, now seemed secondary to maintaining control over the network's operations and message. The atmosphere of unity that had defined Daystar was starting to feel like a distant memory. This internal shift also created growing tensions within the Lamb family itself. Joni's increasing control over the network wasn't just a matter of leadership style. It was a personal issue that affected family relationships. Jonathan, once a key part of Daystar's operations, began to feel more and more excluded. He had been groomed to take on a greater role in the network after Marcus's death. But as time passed, it became clear that Joni had no intention of stepping aside. The dynamic between mother and son became strained, and the tensions within the family mirrored the struggles within the network itself. As Joni became more autocratic, the rest of the Lamb family found themselves caught in the middle. Some members tried to speak up about the direction the network was taking, but their concerns were often met with resistance. For those who disagreed with Joni's approach, the message was clear: challenge the leadership, and you would face consequences. Employees, family members, and trusted colleagues who raised concerns about the changes at Daystar found themselves pushed out or silenced. The culture at Daystar was no longer one of open dialogue and collaboration. It had become one of fear, control, and intimidation. The growing control within Daystar didn't go unnoticed by those outside the organization. Daystar had long been a symbol of Christian unity, a family ministry that spread the message of hope and faith to millions. But as the leadership style shifted, so did the public perception. Critics began to raise concerns about whether Daystar was still fulfilling its original mission. Was it still about ministry, or had it become about power? This question became even more urgent as the Lamb family division deepened. As Jonathan and others began to publicly voice their concerns, the cracks in the family's unity became more visible. One of the most troubling aspects of this shift was the impact on Daystar's staff and ministry partners. What had once been a family-oriented organization, with deep connections to its employees and partners, started to feel more like a corporate entity. Longtime employees who had dedicated their careers to the network found themselves caught in the middle of a growing power struggle. Many were uncertain about their future at Daystar, unsure whether they would continue to have a place in a network that seemed to be losing its original sense of purpose. The tension reached a boiling point when Jonathan Lamb began to speak out publicly about the changes at Daystar. He expressed frustration at being sidelined and accused his mother of turning Daystar into a platform driven by power and control. This public criticism only deepened the divide within the Lamb family. It became clear that Daystar was no longer the united, family-driven ministry it once was. The public nature of this conflict put Daystar at a crossroads. Joni's growing control over Daystar's operations and message marked a turning point in the network's history. What had once been a collaborative family endeavor was now a power struggle that threatened to tear the Lamb family and Daystar apart. The rise of Joni Lamb's control wasn't just about leadership style, it was about the future of the network and the values it was built on. Would Daystar continue to prioritize its mission to serve others, or would it become just another media empire driven by ambition and power? The answer to that question would shape the future of Daystar, the Lamb family, and the legacy they had worked so hard to build. The public division, family conflict, and allegations within the Lamb family and Daystar television network created a storm that no one could have predicted. What was once seen as a united family working together to spread faith and hope now appeared deeply fractured. The root of this tension lay in the leadership transition following Marcus Lamb's sudden death. Many expected Marcus's son, Jonathan, to step into a larger leadership role at Daystar, given his years of experience in the ministry. But instead, his mother, Joni Lamb, took on a more dominant position, and the direction of Daystar started to shift. In the early days, many understood why Joni stepped into this leadership role. She was the co-founder and had worked alongside Marcus for years. However, as time went on, it became clear that Joni wasn't interested in sharing control. She began making decisions unilaterally, and her leadership style shifted from collaborative to more autocratic. Jonathan, who had always been involved in key decisions, found himself sidelined. He had expected to take a more prominent role in Daystar's future, but instead felt excluded by his mother. This caused deep frustration, which soon grew into a public conflict. Jonathan and his wife Susie started speaking out, raising concerns about the direction of Daystar under Johnny's leadership. They felt the ministry, which had always focused on serving the community, was now driven more by personal ambition and power. As if this wasn't enough, Jonathan and Susie also publicly accused the leadership of covering up serious allegations within the family. They spoke out about a lack of transparency and what they perceived as a failure to address important issues. This was a turning point. What began as a leadership disagreement quickly became a public scandal, with much larger implications for Daystar's future. Joni's response was firm. She denied the accusations made by Jonathan and Susie, defending her leadership decisions. She also dismissed their concerns as personal grievances. But the damage was done. Whether true or not, the allegations cast a shadow over the Lamb family's reputation and Daystar's credibility. What had once been seen as a network built on faith and family now seemed divided. Supporters began to question what was really going on behind the scenes. Daystar, which had long been a beacon of unity and hope, now appeared fractured and uncertain. This family conflict didn't just affect the Lamb family. It sent shockwaves through Daystar's broader network of employees, partners, and viewers. Staff members who had worked closely with the Lamb family for years were now unsure of where they stood. Some sided with Joni, others with Jonathan, but many were simply confused by the sudden shift in leadership dynamics. Longtime supporters of Daystar found themselves questioning if the network they had trusted was still the same, or if it had become a platform for power struggles rather than ministry. The conflict was exacerbated by Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss. Doug's rise within Daystar after Marcus's death raised eyebrows, with some questioning whether his influence was solidifying Joni's control over the network. His growing prominence only seemed to intensify the sense of division, particularly among those who were already questioning Joni's leadership style. As the family conflict deepened, so did the public division. Jonathan's public criticism of his mother and Daystar's leadership painted a picture of a network that was losing its way. The Lamb family, once considered a united force in Christian media, was now at odds, and the effects were felt across the entire Daystar community. What was once a ministry focused on spreading faith and serving others seemed to have turned into a battleground for power and control. The fallout from the public conflict raised tough questions about Daystar's future. Could the network heal from the internal strife and allegations? Would the Lamb family reconcile? Or was this division permanent? Viewers, supporters, and ministry partners were left wondering whether Daystar would return to its roots and focus on its original mission, or if it would remain embroiled in power struggles and family drama. The future of the network seemed uncertain, and the damage to its reputation would take time to repair. The public division, family conflict, and allegations highlighted how even the most respected ministries are vulnerable to internal struggles. It showed that power, ambition, and personal conflicts could overshadow the very mission that had made Daystar successful in the first place. The outcome of this conflict would determine whether Daystar could reclaim its position as a trusted ministry, or if the Lamb family's legacy would be forever marked by division and scandal. The battle for Daystar's future was not just about the direction of a Christian television network. It became a battle for its soul. What once started as a family ministry built on faith, unity, and community outreach was now at a crossroads, and the very essence of its mission was in question. As the Lamb family became divided, and the allegations and power struggles unfolded, the network found itself in a precarious situation. The deep rift between Joni Lamb and her son Jonathan, the exclusion of key family members from leadership decisions, and the public fallout were all taking a toll, not just on the family, but on Daystar's future as a whole. The network's original vision had always been to spread the message of the gospel and to provide a platform for ministries around the world. Daystar was founded on the idea of serving others, offering hope, and sharing the Christian faith. For years, it grew into one of the largest Christian media platforms, reaching millions of viewers globally. But as the leadership changed, so did the focus of the network. Many began to question whether Daystar had strayed from its founding principles. The shift was subtle at first, but as Joni took a more dominant role after Marcus's death, the changes became more pronounced. The ministry, once a family-run operation, had begun to feel more like a business. Decisions were no longer being made with input from family members, and many of the staff members who had been part of Daystar since its early days started to feel alienated. Joni's increasing control over the network's direction was seen by many as a move away from the collaborative, family-centered approach that Daystar had once embodied. What had been a network built on unity and transparency was now becoming something far different. A place where power and control seemed to take precedence over ministry. For Jonathan, this shift was personal. He had spent his whole life working alongside his parents to build Daystar. When Marcus passed, many believed Jonathan would naturally take over the leadership of the network. He had the experience, the respect, and the passion to carry on his father's legacy. But Johnny's control over Daystar quickly pushed him out of the decision-making process. The exclusion of Jonathan from key leadership roles was one of the primary sources of tension in the family. Jonathan had long been involved in the network's operations, and when he was suddenly sidelined, it felt like a betrayal. It was clear to Jonathan that his mother's leadership had taken a more authoritarian turn, and he became increasingly frustrated with the direction Daystar was going. His public criticism of his mother's leadership and the growing rift within the family only added fuel to the fire. The battle for Daystar's future wasn't just about who would lead the network, it was about what the network would stand for. Jonathan's accusations about the shift in leadership and the growing focus on power and control resonated with many of Daystar's supporters. They had watched Daystar grow over the years, and many had come to trust it as a beacon of Christian values. But now, with the Lamb family divided and the network's future uncertain, they began to question if Daystar had lost its way. Was the network still dedicated to spreading the message of the gospel, or had it become a platform for personal ambition? The fallout from the family conflict was profound. Supporters who had been loyal to Daystar for years found themselves questioning whether they could continue to support a ministry so clearly in turmoil. Some donors withdrew their financial support, and churches that had partnered with the network began to distance themselves.